All right, so during this unit, you're going to be doing guided notes, so you should have received those already. Because of the conditions that we've got going on with the pandemic right now, this is going to be primarily a lecture. If we were able to meet normally in class, we would be doing a lot more discussions and some more hands-on activities. So hopefully we'll be able to get to that soon. Hopefully we can get back into school as soon as possible. All right, so this unit is on World War I, which is also known as the Great War. We're going to start off not talking about the war itself, but talking about some of the causes of World War I. Now, most people have heard of Archduke Franz Ferdinand and how he was shot in Sarajevo, and think about that as the starting point of the war. However, there was a lot of other things that went into causing and allowing such a great war to take place. At the time when World War I started, three of the major powers, that would be Germany, England, and Russia, their monarchs were all first cousins. In fact, after the war, the German emperor, Kaiser Wilhelm, he said that if his grandmother had been alive, Queen Victoria, then the war would never have happened. So you would think that there would be the situation where, with so many of the monarchs related, that there wouldn't be a situation where you would end up in war. However, it did happen. And we're going to talk about some of the things that made that possible. Part of that has to do with the Balkans. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some alliances and just kind of the situation of what had been going on in Europe that made it possible for that to happen. As you know, we always go over the standards that we're going to be discussing during this class, the ones that we're going to be using. Today, the history standards, we are going to evaluate how events and developments were shaped by the unique circumstances of time and place, as well as broader contexts. And then we're also going to explain multiple causes of conflict. So you'll see that as we go through the slides and through our lesson today. For your homework, we're going to be integrating some of the language arts standards. So you're going to need to be able to cite strong and thorough textual evidence to support analysis of what the text says explicitly, as well as inferences drawn from the text. So we'll talk a little bit about that some more as we get to the end and where you're getting ready to do your homework. For your learning objective today, you will be able to describe the conditions in Europe which allowed World War I to take place. Now remember, as I said as we started this, we were in a position where three of the major monarchs were actually first cousins. So you would think that they wouldn't be able to start World War I, that they wouldn't have a reason to because they were all relatives. However, we're going to talk about those conditions that were in place with the alliances and whatnot that caused this to actually happen. So as we start out, I want you to think about this, about what would you do if this was a situation that you lived in, okay? So your nation is one of the oldest, wealthiest, and most populous in the world. Your science, your technology industries are the best in the world, but you're surrounded by weaker countries that build up their navies, they threaten your colonies, they steal your resources, and they also want to take some of your territory. Now you fear that they're going stronger at your expense, and eventually they might try to take over your homeland. You might lose your home and your cultural heritage forever. What would you do and why? So I'm going to give you a chance to think about that for a minute, and then I would like you to write down your answer. What do you think that you would do in that situation and why? So in order to understand what's going on during this time period, you're going to need the following vocabulary. You need to know what militarism is, what alliance means, what nationalism, and then what imperialism meant at this time. Now, normally we would do this as a group, and I would let you work as a group to define these. But I want you to look at your paperwork, and I'm going to read the definition, and I want you to try and determine which one of these is being identified, okay? So the first one that I want you to look for, This is identifying with your own nation and supporting its interests, especially to the exclusion or detriment of the interests of other nations. Okay, let me tell that to you again. Okay, this is identifying with your own nation. You're supporting the interests of your own nation, especially to the exclusion or detriment of the interests of other nations. Okay, so that one is nationalism. Okay, the second one that I want you to look for, this is the belief or desire of a government or people that a country should maintain a strong military capability and be prepared to use it aggressively to defend or promote national interests. Okay, let me read that one more time for you. This is the belief or desire of a government or a people that a country should maintain a strong military capability and be prepared to use it aggressively to defend or promote national interests. Okay. So that definition goes along with militarism. Now, militarism also includes rising in military expenditure, so they're spending more money on their military. They are increasing their military and naval forces, and there's a lot more influence of the military men on the policies of the civil government. And usually, along with militarism, there is a preference for force as a solution to problems. So they look straight to their military when they have problems instead of to diplomacy. Okay, so the next one I want you to try and identify. This is the act of allying or a state of being allied. It's a formal agreement or treaty between two or more nations that they will cooperate for a specific purpose. Okay, so I'm going to read that to you again, see if you can figure out which one this is. This is the act of allying with or a state of being allied. It is a formal agreement or a treaty between two or more nations. They will cooperate for a specific purpose. Okay, so that one is alliances. So with alliances, you see, like we had in World War I and World War II, you had the Triple Entente in World War I, which was an alliance between Great Britain, France, and Russia. And then you had the Axis powers on the other side, which was basically Germany, Italy, and Austria-Hungary. Okay, and then the last one is a policy or ideology of extending the rule or authority of a country over other countries and peoples, often by military force or by gaining political and economic control. Okay, so again, the definition is it's a policy or ideology of extending the rule or authority of a country over other countries or people, often by military force or by gaining political or economic control. Okay, so and that is imperialism. So here we're going to talk about the alliances in Europe in 1914. As you can see from this map, it looks pretty self-explanatory, right? You've got United Kingdom allied with France and Russia. They are called the Triple Entente. And then you've got Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Italy who are allied, and these are called the Triple Alliance. Now, Russia also has allies in Serbia and Montenegro, and that's going to come up in a second as we talk about the Balkans. Now, that looks pretty self-explanatory, right? But it's a little bit more confusing than that, because like we talked about before, Germany, the United Kingdom, and Russia, their monarchs are all cousins. In fact, in all of Europe, basically the only area that is not ruled by a monarchy is France at this point. They're the only one that has a republican form of government. Everybody else basically is a monarch or has a monarch on the throne. So there's a lot of confusion going on in here, and there's a lot of alliances that are happening behind the scenes that aren't just coming from the monarchy. This is coming from the people as well as from the generals. Okay, so at this point we know that Germany and Austria-Hungary, they're allies, and they're allies with Italy, but Italy's kind of weak, and nobody really figures that Italy is going to help out or be there if there's ever a war. Okay, now at this time also Germany and France are at odds, and they had gone through the Franco-Prussian War, and they didn't like each other because of the Franco-Prussian War. And Russia is allied with France because Russia's mad that Germany annexed their lands during the Franco-Prussian War. And at the same time, the German elite are looking down on the Russians as if they're, poor peasants and not good for anything. And France and England are both allies at this time, but they have some kind of contingency plan, this undercover issue that they've got going on as well, because both countries, both England and France, had plans in place that they might invade one another if something happened. So in 1917, the Triple Entente actually took place. It actually became official. In 1914, the Triple Entente actually became official between England, Russia, and France. So this became official, what they were doing in 1914. Now, Germany was friendly with the Ottoman Empire, which nowadays is known as Turkey. Russia supported the Serbians and the Slavs, which means that Russia was against the Ottoman Empire. And Great Britain doesn't like the fact that Germany just got a navy. Now, Great Britain has a navy for centuries because they have territories all over the place. But Germany doesn't have as much of a need as a navy, and they decided they were going to build one, and they built it, and it became pretty powerful, and it threatened England, made them feel threatened. All right, so now this is the area of the world where things are going to get really interesting. This area is known as the Balkans. Okay, so in 1908, Franz Joseph, who is the Emperor of Austria-Hungary, he annexed Bosnia-Herzegovina, which is down in the lower part of of Austria-Hungary, and that really made the Serbians mad because they felt that Bosnia should belong to them. So because they couldn't get Bosnia, they started turning their expansionism towards the south, towards Albania. Now, they wanted Albania because they needed a seaport, because they wanted to keep expanding, and they didn't have a seaport, so they really wanted Albania. Okay, now in 1911, Italy, which we saw a minute ago, was in part of the Triple Alliance of Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Italy. So Italy is the weakest part. They didn't expect that Italy would ever join them if they went to war. But in 1911, Italy launched a war against the Ottomans, which the Ottoman Empire had been one of the major forces in Europe and in Asia Minor for centuries. And Italy went against Ottomans for Libya, which is in northern part of Africa, and they actually won. And they took over Libya, and the Ottoman Empire didn't really do anything. Now, when Italy did that, that made the Balkan states think that they might have a hope that they could win a war against the Ottoman Empire. Now, Serbia allied with Bulgaria and Montenegro and Greece, and they wanted to basically drive the Ottomans out, and they were backed by the Russians. The Russians really wanted to push the Ottomans and the Turks back out of Europe entirely, push them into Asia Minor, and kind of get them out of the way. So these four nations of Serbia, Bulgaria, Montenegro, and Greece, they created the Balkan League in 1912. In early 1912, and then by October, this Balkan League had gone to war with the Ottoman Empire. So the war started in October of 1912, and ended in May of 1913 with a win for the Balkan League. So they were successful in driving the Ottomans out of Europe. And actually, that was the first time that the Balkan area had been free of the Ottomans in over 500 years. So we're going to talk in a little bit in a minute about kind of Serbia's history, because Serbia is really the hot spot that kind of starts World War I. Now, Serbia had been part of the Ottoman Empire for years and years and years, and they had been really oppressed and violently oppressed by the Ottoman Empire. And Bulgaria had had the same issue. Now, Bulgaria really wanted Macedonia. And that was one of the things that they were promises they were going to get to take Macedonia if they joined in with this Balkan League to go against the Ottoman Empire. And by May 1913, the Balkan League had won the Balkan Wars, and it broke down pretty quickly after that. So there was actually fighting over the division of Macedonia. Bulgaria wanted the whole thing. Serbia didn't want to back down. And so the Balkan League disintegrated. And a month after the end of the First Balkan War, so we're talking it ended in May 1913, so a month later in June of 1913, Bulgaria turned around and attacked Greece and Serbia. So during the Second Balkan War that's going on now, Serbia occupies Albania, and they have their seaport that they want. But during that same time, Austria-Hungary, the emperor says, hey, wait a second, you got to get out. So they issued an ultimatum to Serbia to get out of Albania, and Serbia didn't actually do anything, just went okay and withdrew. But because of both of the Balkan Wars, by the early 1914, Serbia had doubled its territory, the Balkan League had disintegrated, and that left Russia with only Serbia as an ally in the Balkan area. Now, Austria-Hungary wanted to stop Serbia from expanding anymore, and Russia just wanted to save face because they backed the Balkan League, which had fallen apart. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit more about Serbia, since Serbia is the major hotspot, okay? Now, like we said in a second ago, Serbia, Bulgaria, and Albania had all been part of the Ottoman Empire for centuries. Like for something like 1,300 years, they were part of the Ottoman Empire, and they had been violently oppressed. The Ottoman Empire was primarily Muslim. A lot of Serbia and Bulgaria and Albania were actually Christian. So that there was a lot of oppression going on there, a lot of violence that had been happening against them. Serbia, by 1914, when we're talking about, Serbia was a really young nation. They actually only got their independence from the Ottoman Empire in 1867, and then that had only actually been formally recognized. They had only been recognized as a nation in 1878 due to the Treaty of Berlin. So Serbia is a very young nation. It's very proud, very nationalistic. They had a saying that anywhere that a Serbian is, that is Serbia. So that kind of alienated a lot of the rest of Europe. They also were brutally oppressive to minorities within their own borders. So just like they had been oppressed by the Ottomans, they were turning around and oppressing the minorities that lived in their nation, particularly the Muslims. Okay, so they also had basically a terrorist organization, which was known as Narodna Obdrana. Now, this is in English, another term for it was the Black Hand. So you can tell from the name that these guys weren't very much into like beautifying parks or anything like that. These guys were very nationalistic. They were going to do what they wanted to do, what they felt was right, and they were going to do it using force. So these guys are very militaristic, they're very nationalistic, and they have an alliance with Russia. And that's basically all they had alliance left with after the Second Balkan War. Okay, so the Black Hand, not only was it very militaristic, it actually had, as you can see from this picture, a lot of their members were members of the military. So these were high-ranking officials in the military that were leading this Black Hand organization. And we're going to look at one of their manifestos in a second here. So what you are seeing here, this is a statement from the Serbian group Narodna Obdrana, otherwise known as the Black Hand. And this is a statement that they gave in 1911. And this is following the annexation of Bosnia by Austria-Hungary. So what this group is saying, it says the annexation of Bosnia was only one of the blows which the enemies of Serbia have aimed at this land. Many blows preceded it, and many will follow it. Work and preparation are necessary so that a new attack may not find Serbia equally unprepared. The object assigned to the work to be done by the people of every class is the preparation for war in all forms of national work, corresponding to the requirements of the present day. This is to be effected through the strengthening of the national consciousness, bodily exercises, increase of material and bodily well-being, cultural improvements, etc. A new blow, like that of the annexation, must be met by a new Serbia, in which every Serbian, from the child to the old man, is an infantryman. The Narodna Obdrana proclaims to the people that Austria is our first and greatest enemy. Just as once the Turks attacked us from the south, so Austria attacks us today from the north. If the Narodna Obdrana preaches the necessity of fighting Austria, she preaches a sacred truth. Today, the Narodna Obdrana gathers under its standard the citizens of Serbia as it gathered them at the time of the annexation. Then the cry was for war. Now the cry is for work. Then meetings, demonstrations, voluntary committees, weapons, and bombs were needed. Today, steady, fanatical, tireless work is required to fulfill the tasks and duties to which we have drawn attention for preparation for the fight with gun and cannon. Okay, so this is the statement that the Black Hand sent out in 1911. I want you to look at this, and I want you to think about what is being said here. Okay, so we're talking about Serbia has had a lot of blows, and they're talking about work that is necessary. So this is what your assignment is going to be based on, and we're going to go, in the next slide, you're going to see what questions I need you to answer. But I want you to pay attention to what is being said here, okay? We're talking about that a new blow has to be met by a new Serbia, where everyone is an infantryman. Now these guys are very nationalistic, like we just said. They are very militaristic, and they have a lot of anger that you can feel coming through this. All right, so keep this in mind, and you're going to need to look at this as we go into the next slide. All right, so these are the questions that I need you to answer based on what we just read from the statement from Narodna Obdrana, or the Black Hand. Okay, so the first question you're going to answer is, according to Narodna Obdrana, what is the work that is to be done by the people of Serbia? Okay, what work is it? Because they keep talking about work. What is that work? Okay. The second question I need you to answer is, why is this work necessary? So what is the Black Hand saying that is happening that makes that work necessary? Why are they needing to do that? Okay. The third question I need you to answer is, what ideals is this group appealing to? Okay, are they appealing to nationalism? Are they appealing to religion? What ideals are they appealing to? And I want you to not just tell me what that is, but explain to me, how you came to that, okay? And that goes into the next question. What statements lead you to that decision? So where did you read in that statement from the Black Hand that makes you think that this group is appealing to that particular ideal, okay? The fifth question, does Narodna Obdrana, or does the Black Hand, think that this task that they've set, is this going to be an easy task to accomplish? Okay, and then the next question is, how do you know? So I want to hear what you read in that statement, what you heard in that statement, that lets you know whether they think that this is going to be an easy task to accomplish. Okay? And then the last question I need you to answer is, if you were Serbian during this time period and you read this document, what would you do? And why would you do that? Okay, so think about, how does that make you feel, what they're saying in the statement that we just read? How does that make you feeling? And what does it make you want to do? All right, so that is your homework for tonight. is to answer those 7 questions, and I want you to refer back to the statement that Narodna Obdrana, or the Black Hand, put out as you do that. So give me complete sentences, cite the evidence that you're finding in the text that is telling me what these answers are. Okay. Our next lesson, we're gonna go into the next things that are going to happen. So we've talked about nationalism, militarism, the alliances that are going on. We've talked about the Balkans and how that's kind of a hot spot. So our next class, we're going to start talking about what actually happened in Serbia that provided the spark to put this whole tinderbox into a war. Okay, so we're going to talk about the assassination of the Archduke, and then the different pieces that fell into place following that. So I will see you next week.